You know that Florida paradise everyone's been chasing? Those beautiful beach days and the warm weather? Well, I've got news for you. We've analyzed the numbers on housing, crime, and insurance rates across Florida's major markets. And what we found won't please you. 12 cities where buying a home in 2025 isn't just risky, but financially suicidal. Here's the crazy part. Our number one pick isn't some obscure small town. It's a magical place where millions of tourists flock every year. Welcome to the countdown of the top 12 worst cities to buy a home in Florida in 2025. 12. Miami. Starting our countdown at number 12, the Magic City has lost its spell. Miami, South Beach glamour, Art Deco dreams, and that irresistible Latin rhythm. This is supposed to be where wealthy retirees sip mojitos while their property values soar. But in 2025, even millionaires are getting priced out. Median home price, $600,000, 20% above state average. Insurance costs, 30% higher than the national average. Market competition, brutal. To think Miami isn't even the worst on our list, and it's already financially devastating for most families. We're talking about a median home price that's literally 20% higher than the rest of Florida, and that's before you factor in the insurance nightmare. Remember Hurricane Ian? Miami remembers. Insurance companies are fleeing Florida faster than tourists flee a Category 5 hurricane. Premiums have skyrocketed 30% above the national average, and some insurers are just gone, vanished, like they never existed. However, here's what keeps Miami at number 12 instead of higher. It's still Miami. The global appeal, the economic diversity, the international investment, it's all still there for now. But if Miami, with all its advantages, is this problematic, imagine what's happening in the rest of Florida. And trust me, our next city proves that small town Florida charm comes with big city problems. 11. Pomona Park. Pomona Park. Population, roughly 900 people. You'd think a tiny town would mean affordable living, right? Think again. Home values, $146,000 below the national average. Monthly cost of living, $3,200. Livability index, 70. That's not good. Wait, what? A town with 900 people has a $3,200 monthly cost of living? That's more than some major cities. How is that even mathematically possible? Here's the brutal truth. When home values are $146,000 below the national average, that's a red flag the size of Texas. The market is telling you something. Nobody wants to live here, and neither should you. The investment potential is basically zero. We're talking about 1% annual growth in a state where other markets are seeing double digits. Your money would literally grow faster in a savings account. And let's talk about amenities. What amenities? The nearest Starbucks is probably in another county. Good luck getting food delivered when the closest restaurant is a 20-minute drive through swampland. But our next city shows that sometimes location doesn't matter when the math just doesn't work. But me. At number 10, we have a city that proves proximity to success doesn't guarantee success. Mayo, sitting pretty between Gainesville and Tallahassee, two thriving college towns with stable economies. You'd think some of that success would trickle down, right? Wrong. Monthly cost of living, $3,512. Median home value, $200,000. Growth rate, 1% year over year. Ouch. Here's the Mayo paradox. It's close to everything but good at nothing. Despite being sandwiched between two university towns, Mayo has managed to avoid all the benefits while inheriting all the problems. That $3,512 monthly cost of living in a town where the median home is worth $200,000. The math doesn't compute. It's like paying Manhattan prices for Mississippi amenities. And what's making this more depressing is that rural flood risks are driving insurance costs through the roof. You're essentially paying premium prices to live in a flood zone with no job opportunities. It's like winning the lottery in reverse. The 1% growth rate tells you everything you need to know. In a state where real estate has been booming, Mayo has been napping. It proves that location only works if people actually want to stay there. Speaking of locations people are starting to avoid, our next city used to be a retiree's paradise. 9. Inverness, the crown jewel of the Nature Coast. Pristine lakes, golf courses, and those picture-perfect retirement communities. Inverness was supposed to be where you bought your forever home and watched your grandkids grow up. Home value decline, minus 1.2% in 2024. Median home price, $220,000. Infrastructure status, aging and expensive. But here's the reality check nobody talks about. Inverness is going backwards. While the rest of Florida was riding the post-pandemic housing boom, Inverness home values declined by 1.2% in 2024. In a state where people are literally fighting over houses, Inverness couldn't maintain property values. The infrastructure is crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. We're talking about roads built in the 1970s, water systems from the Reagan era, and electrical grids that probably remember when flip phones were cutting-edge technology. Every repair is going to cost you thousands. That affordable $220,000 house? Add another $50,000 for the roof, $20,000 for the HVAC system, and God knows how much for the foundation issues you'll discover 6 months after moving in. Don't get me wrong, Inverness is beautiful, but beauty doesn't pay the bills. And speaking of bills, our next city shows what happens when tourism money can't solve everything. 8. Panama City. Spring break central, sugar white beaches, and that laid-back coastal vibe that makes you want to quit your job and become a beach bum. But in 2025, even the beach bums are leaving. Population change, minus 0.18%, 2021 to 2022. Median home price, $250,000. Economic dependence, tourism, dangerous. Here's what nobody tells you about tourism economies. They're about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. And speaking of hurricanes, Panama City knows all about those too. The population is shrinking. We're not talking about slow growth. We're talking about actual decline. People are packing up and leaving faster than tourists after spring break ends. When a beach town with perfect weather can't retain residents, what does that tell you about the economic fundamentals? It screams unsustainable. The housing market is oversupplied because everyone had the same brilliant idea. Let's buy rental properties in Panama City. Now the market is flooded with Airbnbs competing against each other, while local wages can't support the housing costs. And then there's hurricane season. Every year, it's like playing Russian roulette with your entire investment. Insurance costs are climbing faster than a Category 5 storm surge. But our next city shows what happens when your economic foundation is built on quicksand. Number 7. Sebring. Home of the famous 12 Hours of Sebring race. For one weekend a year, this town is the center of the motorsports universe. For the other 363 days, Sebring is racing toward economic disaster. Unemployment rate, 6% versus state average of 4%. Median home price, $210,000. Economic diversity. What diversity? When your entire economic identity revolves around one annual event, you're not running a sustainable business model. You're running a very expensive hobby. That 6% unemployment rate should terrify anyone thinking about buying here. When Florida, a state that's been on an economic hot streak, has an average unemployment rate of 4%, and Sebring is sitting at 6%, that's a structural problem. The median home price of $210,000 might look reasonable until you realize there's no economic engine driving appreciation. It's like buying a car with no engine. Sure, it looks nice in the driveway, but it's not taking you anywhere. And let's be honest about that motorsports connection. Yes, it's cool. Yes, it brings some tourism revenue, but banking your housing investment on an annual car race is like betting your retirement on a single stock pick. It might work out, or it might leave you stranded on the side of the road. But our next city proves that sometimes crime doesn't pay, especially for property values. 6. Homestead, the agricultural heartland of South Florida. Fresh produce, farmers markets, and that authentic small town feel. Homestead should be the perfect escape from Miami's chaos just an hour south. Instead, it's become Miami's nightmare neighbor. Crime rate, 65% above state average. Violent crimes, approximately 700 per 100,000 residents. Home value decline, minus 2.3% in 2024. Wait, what? Home values dropped 2.3% in 2024? In Florida? During a housing boom? That's like losing money in a casino where the house is literally giving away chips. But here's the real problem. Violent crime is through the roof. We're talking 700 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. To put that in perspective, the national average is around 380. Homestead is nearly double. You know what happens to property values when crime goes up? They go down. fast. It's basic economics with a dash of common sense. Nobody wants to pay premium prices to live in fear. The median home price of $350,000 might seem reasonable for South Florida, but factor in the declining values and rising crime, and you're essentially paying a premium to watch your investment evaporate while hoping you don't become a statistic. But now that we're down to our top 5, I suggest you pay attention, because we're taking things to a whole new level, starting with Daytona losing all its sunlight. 5. Daytona Beach. Daytona Beach, NASCAR Central, spring break destination, and home of the world's most famous beach. But in 2025, it's becoming famous for all the wrong reasons. Violent crimes, 928 per 100,000, 151% above national average. Population decline, minus 0.2% annually. Median home price, $270,000. Hold up, did you catch that crime statistic? 928 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. That's 151% above the national average. You're more than twice as likely to be a victim of violent crime in Daytona Beach than in the average American city. This has forced an annual population decline of 0.2%. In a state that's been the destination for millions of Americans seeking a better life, Daytona Beach is running in reverse. You know what happens when crime goes up and population goes down? Property values crash faster than a NASCAR driver hitting the wall at 200 miles per hour. The median home price of $270,000 might look reasonable, but you're essentially buying a lottery ticket where the odds are stacked against you. Every month you own property here, you're betting that crime will go down, population will stabilize, and tourism will somehow save the day. But here's the reality. Tourism economies are fragile, and when your main attractions are racing and beaches, you're competing with every other coastal city in America, and most of them don't have Daytona's crime problem. Daytona Beach might be fast on the track, but it's slow in solving its fundamental problems. Speaking of basic issues, our next city shows what happens when time stands still. 4. Ocala. Ocala, horse country, rolling hills, thoroughbred farms, and that old Florida charm that developers haven't ruined yet. It should be the perfect blend of rural tranquility and urban accessibility. Instead, it's become a case study in economic stagnation. Unemployment, 5% versus state average of 4%. Job growth, practically non-existent. Home appreciation, 0.5% year over year. Median home price, $230,000. That 0.5% appreciation rate should make every investor run for the hills. In a state where some markets are seeing 10 to 15% annual growth, Ocala is barely keeping pace with inflation. Your money would literally grow faster in a high-yield savings account. The unemployment rate tells the whole story. While Florida has been adding jobs at a record pace, Ocala is stuck at 5%, 25% higher than the state average. And let's talk about that infrastructure. We're talking about a city that peaked sometime around 1985 and has been coasting ever since. The roads need work, the utilities need upgrades, and the downtown area looks like a museum of what Florida used to be. However, Ocala is still beautiful and peaceful, but it's economically dead. You're essentially paying $230,000 to live in a very expensive retirement home where the average age is just happy to be here. Ocala is where time stands still, and unfortunately, so do your property values. But our top 3 cities prove that sometimes moving backwards is worse than standing in one place. 3. Pensacola. At number 3, we have a city that's fighting a losing battle on multiple fronts. Pensacola, the city of 5 flags, military heritage, pristine beaches, and that charming historic downtown. This should be the perfect combination of stability, beauty, and affordability. Instead, it's become a perfect storm of problems. Crime rate, 86% above state average. Job growth, 2% annually versus state's 3.5%. Military dependence, dangerous. Median home price, $260,000. Here's what they don't tell you about military towns. When your economic foundation depends on Uncle Sam's budget decisions, you're always one defense spending cut away from disaster. That crime rate should terrify anyone thinking about raising a family here. We're talking about 86% above the state average. In a state that's already dealing with crime issues, Pensacola has managed to make itself stand out for all the wrong reasons. The job growth numbers tell the real story. While Florida has been adding jobs at 3.5% annually, Pensacola is limping along at 2%. And here's the Pensacola paradox. You've got beautiful beaches, historic charm, and military stability, but somehow the market is flatlining. When a city with obvious advantages can't generate economic momentum. What does that tell you about its underlying problems? Tourism is seasonal, military spending is unpredictable, and the private sector is, well, let's just say it's not exactly booming. You're essentially betting your financial future on a three-legged stool where all three legs are wobbly. Pensacola might have 5 flags, but in 2025, they're all flying at half-mast. But if you think that's depressing, wait until you see our number 2 city. Number 2, Cape Coral. Cape Coral, the waterfront wonderland. More miles of canals than Venice, Italy, planned communities, boating lifestyle, and that Southwest Florida charm that attracted thousands during the pandemic boom. But in 2025, it's becoming a case study in what happens when artificial demand meets reality. Predicted price decline, minus 6.5% to minus 7% in 2025. Median home price, $380,000, falling to 2022 levels. Insurance costs, 40% above the national average. Market status, oversupplied and overpriced. Here's what people don't tell you about Coral. Developers went absolutely insane during the pandemic, building houses faster than they could find buyers. The result, a massive oversupply just as demand is cooling off. That $380,000 median home price is plummeting back to 2022 levels. We're talking about losing 3 years of appreciation in 1 year. If you bought at the peak, you're about to take a financial beating that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about real estate. And then there's the insurance nightmare. Florida's insurance market is already a disaster, but Cape Coral, it's a particularly expensive disaster. We're talking 40% above the national average, and some areas are becoming completely uninsurable. Those beautiful canals everyone fell in love with, they're flood risks waiting to happen. Climate change isn't coming to Cape Coral, it's already here, and it's sending insurance bills that'll make your mortgage payment look reasonable. The pandemic boom attracted everyone who thought they could get rich quickly in Florida real estate. Now reality is setting in, and it's ugly. Cape Coral is exhibit A in why timing matters more than location. But even Cape Coral's disaster pales in comparison to our number 1 pick, a city that's managed to combine every possible housing market nightmare into one perfectly terrible investment. Number 1, Orlando. Orlando, the city beautiful, home to Disney World, Universal Studios, and millions of tourists who flock here every year, believing in magic. But here's the thing about magic, it's an illusion, and in 2025, the Orlando housing market's illusion is about to shatter. Median home price, $450,000, 15% above state average. Violent crimes, approximately 800 per 100,000, 40% above national average. Economic dependence, tourism, extremely dangerous. Market competition, absolutely brutal. Insurance costs, skyrocketing. How did the home of Mickey Mouse become the number 1 housing nightmare in Florida? Let me count the ways. First, the median home price of $450,000 is 15% higher than the rest of Florida. In a state that's already expensive, Orlando has managed to price itself into the stratosphere. You're paying premium prices for what's essentially a giant theme park with a housing crisis. But here's where it gets really scary. Orlando's entire economy is built on tourism. What happens when there's a recession? When gas prices spike? When another pandemic hits? When people decide to vacation somewhere else? Your investment becomes worthless overnight. Remember 2008? Orlando's housing market collapsed. Home values fell by more than 50%. Entire neighborhoods turned into ghost towns. Foreclosure signs became more common than Disney merchandise. And the crime rate? 800 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. That's 40% above the national average. You're paying $500,000 to live in a city where you're significantly more likely to become a victim of violent crime. The market competition is absolutely insane. Every house that hits the market has 20+ offers. Bidding wars routinely go $50,000 over the asking price. Normal families don't even bother trying to compete against investors and out-of-state cash buyers. But here's the real kicker. The oversupply risk is massive. Investors have been buying properties like candy for the last 3 years, turning them into short-term rentals. The market is flooded with Airbnbs competing against each other, while local wages can't support the housing costs. Hurricane season turns Orlando into a casino where you're betting your entire investment against Mother Nature. Insurance costs are skyrocketing, and some insurers are just abandoning Florida altogether. And let's talk about infrastructure. Orlando's roads, schools, and utilities were designed for a much smaller population. The city is bursting at the seams, and every new resident makes the problem worse. Despite being the most popular tourist destination in America, that popularity is exactly what makes it the worst place to buy a home. The tourism economy is as fragile as a soap bubble. One economic downturn, one major crisis, one shift in vacation trends, and your $450,000 investment becomes a $200,000 nightmare. Orlando proves that sometimes the most magical place on earth is the most dangerous place for your wallet. Now, these aren't isolated problems. They're symptoms of a statewide crisis. Climate change, insurance costs, crime rates, economic volatility. These issues are spreading across Florida faster than a summer thunderstorm. If you're thinking about buying in any of these cities, ask yourself, can you afford to lose 30 to 50% of your investment? Can you handle insurance costs that rival your mortgage payment? Are you prepared for the possibility that your dream home could become your financial nightmare? But here's the thing, knowledge is power, and now you're armed with the truth about Florida's housing market. Don't let anyone sell you on the Florida dream without showing you the Florida reality. And do you also want to avoid falling into the same trap in California? Our next video breaks down the top 12 worst cities to buy a home in California in 2025. Click on it to find out more.